Has Pope Francis affirmed a controversial interpretation of church teaching on communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics. The Vatican says it is now part of the authentic Magisterium. The papal posse, Robert Royal and Father GERALD Murray, are here with analysis. And later, the Trump administration will officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. How does this decision affect an already strained peace process? Foreign policy and terrorism expert Dr. WALID PHARES will analyze. And finally, a little Christmas cheer with the chart-topping Dominican Sisters of Mary bringing us a special preview of their new CD. The World Over begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Father GERALD Murray, Robert Royal, and WALID PHARES, as well as the Dominican Sisters of Mary, are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send us a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. I'll be live tweeting throughout the show, or you can email us at worldover@ewtn.com. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. President Donald Trump rocked the geopolitical landscape in the Middle East on Wednesday, announcing that the United States will recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. And there are plans in the works to relocate the U.S. Embassy there as well. On the domestic front, the move fulfills a campaign pledge. Internationally, it was widely condemned by world leaders, including Pope Francis, as being harmful to Middle East peace. Palestinians and some Muslims throughout the region greeted the news with protests and violence. In his announcement on Wednesday, President Trump said the move was a recognition of reality. It is also a dramatic break with decades of U.S. policy on Jerusalem and counters long-standing international assurances to the Palestinians that the fate of the city will be determined in negotiations. Israel annexed East Jerusalem in 1967. The Palestinians seek it as their future capital. However, Trump went out of his way to say the move is in no way intended to reflect a departure from America's deep commitment to facilitate a lasting Middle East peace agreement.
We want an agreement that is a great deal for the Israelis and a great deal for the Palestinians. We are not taking a position of any final status issues, including the specific boundaries of the Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem or the resolution of contested borders. Those questions are up to the parties involved.
More on this later in the show. And it was a stunning and unprecedented week on Capitol Hill as Democrat Senator Al Franken and Congressman John Conyers have both resigned amid sexual misconduct scandals. More than 30 Democratic senators called for Franken to step down after an eighth woman alleged misconduct, this time that he forcibly tried to kiss her after an interview on his radio show in 2006. This would be prior to Franken being elected Minnesota's junior senator in 2008. Democrat senators had been facing charges of hypocrisy for several weeks as they had called for Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore to bow out of the race amid sexual misconduct allegations from 40 years ago. Franken made his announcement from the Senate floor on Thursday. On the House side, Conyers stepped down on Tuesday after several women alleged sexual harassment by the longtime Michigan congressman. And a big development out of the Vatican in what could be a contradiction of canon law. Pope Francis has accepted a controversial interpretation of Amoris Laetitia as authentic Magisterium. According to a brief statement this week by the Vatican Secretary of State, Cardinal Pietro Parolin, Pope Francis has ordered the official publication of both his September letter of support to the bishops of Argentina, as well as the bishop's original document favoring communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics. Cardinal Francesco Coco Palmiero, head of the Vatican's Council for Legislative Texts, says Pope Francis has, in effect, made the Argentine bishop's interpretation of Amoris Laetitia official teachings of the Church. We'll have much more on this complicated and very important story later in the show with the papal posse. You don't want to miss this. Back here in the United States Supreme Court ruled on Monday to allow the Trump administration's ban on travel to the U.S. by residents of 6 mostly Muslim countries. The High Court permitted those restrictions to take effect pending decisions by the Ninth and Fourth Circuit courts on the legality of the president's executive order. Currently, restrictions apply to travelers from Chad, Iran, Libya, Somalia, Syria, Lebanon, North Korea, and some from Venezuela. Only 2 justices, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Sonia Sotomayor, disagreed with the court's decision. On Wednesday, the Ninth Circuit Court out of Seattle heard oral arguments in the case. And in what could be a major precedent-setting case, the High Court heard oral arguments this week in the case of a Colorado baker who declined to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. The clash pits baker Jack Phillips' free speech and artistic expression, as well as his religious freedom rights, against the gay rights claims of 2 men Phillips turned away in 2012. Justice Anthony Kennedy appears to hold the key vote in this case. Although Kennedy penned the 5-4 decision providing the constitutional right to gay marriage in 2015, in this case, he seemed troubled by states' actions against Phillips. Colorado's Civil Rights Commission, he said, may have had a bias against Phillips, having called his claim of religious belief despicable. Justice Kennedy said tolerance is essential in a free society, and it appears that the Civil Rights Commission here has been neither tolerant nor respectful of Mr. Phillips' religious beliefs, end quote. And the oldest Catholic school in California has relinquished its official ties to the church and its Catholic designation. Officials at San Domenico School in San Anselmo, north of San Francisco, this week announced that the school will no longer be Catholic and will drop ties to the San Francisco Archdiocese. The head of the school, Cecily Stock, said that the current standards of the Western Catholic Educational Association were being more rigorously enforced, and they do not align with the school's long-standing mission to embrace diversity and inclusion of all faiths and backgrounds. Earlier this year, the school faced a backlash as it had reportedly removed more than 160 statues of Jesus, the Holy Mother, the Blessed Mother, and other saints throughout the campus. The school's relationship with the Dominican Sisters of San Rafael will continue, according to a statement provided by the school. It was founded by the Dominican Sisters in 1850. And the Vatican Christmas tree and the nativity scene are now on display. The official inauguration and tree lighting ceremony took place Thursday in St. Peter's Square. The towering 69-foot spruce tree is a gift from the Archdiocese of Elk in Poland. About 60 years old, the tree lost its tip when it was struck by lightning some 70 years ago. It is adorned with ornaments designed by young cancer patients from several Italian hospitals. And children from the Norcia region of central Italy, devastated by the earthquakes of last year, also made ornaments for the Christmas tree. The crèche was donated by a Benedictine abbey in southern Italy, and it's done in the 18th century style. I feel like I'm the fashion channel, lifestyles of the Vatican. The nativity scene is inspired by the works of Mercy and features 20 terracotta figures, some as tall as 6 feet. Next time Martha Stewart can come help me with that read. Finally, please keep our dear friend Father Andrew Apostoli, the Franciscan friar of the Renewal, in your prayers. He has long been a part of the EWTN family. He was a spiritual director to me, a good soul and a wonderful man. Father is nearing death. He's battling cancer. I ask you to keep him in your prayers this week, and I thank you for that in advance. So it is now permissible for divorced and remarried Catholics without an annulment to return to the sacraments, or so it has been reported. A papal act suggests it could be true. The papal posse, Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray, are here to explain. The World Over continues in a moment. Stay there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over. Pope Francis ordered the publication of 2 documents, and they were published this week. They appear to support communion for divorced and civilly remarried Catholics without annulments. Does this decision represent a clear break with age-old church teaching? And if it does, what are the implications for the church at large? Here with analysis is the Papal Posse, Editor-in-Chief of thecatholicthing.org, Robert Royal, and Father GERALD MURRAY, canon, lawyer, and priest of the Archdiocese of New York. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here. A treat to have you both in the house, a whole posse in the house. I want to start by giving the viewers a little backstory here. There was a letter written by the Argentinian bishops after the synod, after the Pope published a document called Amoris Laetitia. There was a lot of controversy. What does it mean? What does it say? The bishops of Argentina had this to say. This was from September of 2016. They write, "In other more complex circumstances, and when it is not possible to obtain a declaration of nullity, the aforementioned option may not in fact be feasible. Nonetheless, it is equally possible to undertake a journey of discernment if one arrives at the recognition that, in a particular case, there are limitations that diminish responsibility of culpability." Now, they're talking about people who are married and remarried. "Particularly when a person judges that he would fall into a subsequent fault by damaging the children of the new union." So when they're remarried and have children. Amoris Laetitia opens up the possibility of access to the sacraments of reconciliation and the Eucharist. These, in turn, dispose the person to continue maturing and growing with the aid of grace. Now, we reported on this when it happened, when this letter dropped, and then the second shoe dropped, and that was the Pope affirming this letter from the Argentinian bishops, where he said, "The document is very good and completely explains the meaning of Chapter 8 of Amoris Laetitia. There are no other interpretations, and I am certain it will do much good. May the Lord reward this effort of pastoral charity." What does that mean? Where are we now that this has been published? And we'll talk about that in the next movement here. This has been published in the official Acts of the Vatican. What does that mean, Father GERALD MURRAY?
Well, it's an attempt at clarification, I think, from the Pope of what he intends, but I think it's only creating more confusion. And I'll say that because what we have here is a statement by the Argentinian bishops that people who are engaged in adulterous activity can claim diminished culpability and can claim that they're actually growing in grace by continuing to commit acts of adultery. That is false. That denies Catholic teaching. Adultery is a mortal sin. We know what adultery is. It means having sexual relations with someone to whom you are not married. Now, for the Pope to then put this and say this is the only possible interpretation of Amoris Laetitia indicates to me that we have a serious problem now coming forward, which is precisely what Cardinal Burke and the other cardinals who submitted the dubia, which is Catholic teaching under assault by Amoris Laetitia? Are we now saying that certain cases of adultery are no longer gravely sinful and that people who publicly engage in this behavior are to be treated as if they're in the state of grace and should be given the sacraments?
Robert Royal, I want you to respond to this. In an interview with Catholic News Service, Cardinal Francesco Coco Palmiero, the president of the Pontifical Council for Legislative Texts, had this to say about the letter and the Argentine bishop's interpretation being published in the official record of Vatican Acts. He said, "The fact that the Pope requested that his letter and the interpretations of the Buenos Aires bishops be published in AAS, the Vatican Official Acts, means that His Holiness has given these documents a particular qualification that elevates them to the level of being official teachings of the Church. While the content of the Pope's letter itself does not contain teachings on faith and morals, it does point toward the interpretations of the Argentine bishops and confirms they're authentically reflecting his own mind. Thus, together, the two documents become the Holy Father's authentic magisterium for the whole Church." Is this authentic magisterium?
Well, as we've said so many times here when we've gotten together, it's hard to say. I know, I agree entirely with what Father just said in terms of what that seems to be affirming. There are other canon lawyers, theologians who say that there are ways in which one can interpret that Argentinian letter that is in harmony with previous Orthodox teaching. At the same time, they say that a similar statement on the same subject by the bishops in Malta cannot be affirmed, and we didn't see any criticism of that. So what we have is still a set of doubts. This letter, by the way, wasn't published. The shoe didn't drop the way you put it. It actually kind of was leaked at a certain point, and I think this continues to reflect the nervousness. I think the Holy Father's nervousness about being too open in affirming something that, if affirmed without a lot of qualification, is going to look like a direct contradiction of the tradition.
Father Gerald Murray, you'll remember when that letter dropped, a lot of people were saying, well, wait a minute, this hasn't even been published in the official acts of the Vatican, so it doesn't, we're giving this too much credit. Well, now it has. Does this represent a rupture, a breakage with what has been taught by certainly the popes, all of the popes in historical memory, as far as we can remember, right back to Jesus?
Look, there can be no rupture about Catholic teaching. Whether it's properly affirmed or seemingly denied, it still remains what it is. I think back, let's say Amoris Laetitia had been issued by Archbishop Bergoglio, Cardinal Bergoglio, when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires. I'm certain that it would have been sent to Rome, and the Congregation of Doctrine and Faith would look at it and said, this is not in harmony with the teachings authentically taught by, among other things, the Code of Canon Law, Pope John Paul II, Pope Benedict. In other words, what we're dealing with now as something that the Pope has said is his authentic magisterium would not have been recognizably in harmony with the Catholic teaching if he had issued it as the bishop in Buenos Aires.
I know, but now he's Pope.
Right, but you think the papal power, I remember in seminary they used to tell us the Pope can't wake up tomorrow morning and say there's a fourth person in the Trinity. Now, in the moral teaching, it's a similar thing. It's not the same level of degree of doctrinal importance, but you can't wake up and say, tomorrow, there's a category of adultery that we no longer call adultery,
right?
Which is if people don't think that they're really committing offense if they receive communion when they're in an invalid second marriage. We have to be clear. The teaching of the church is designed to help people get to heaven, not feel good about themselves. You really want to feel good about yourself? Be in the state of grace and don't publicly violate the church's teaching. That's the message I think that's getting lost here.
Well, it also sounds like there's a new category. There's a fast pass to the sacraments for adulterers if you have a kid. If you have a kid involved, according to the Argentinian bishops, now affirmed by the Pope, now published in the Vatican Acts, that if you have a child and the fear of causing scandal to that child of this new union, forget the kids you might have had with the first wife, let's not even talk about her, but the new union, that this is enough to somehow grant you access to the sacraments. Isn't that what's being said here?
Yeah, and this has been argued over and over again because that argument has been made in other contexts. We've heard this many times.
Spadaro and a number of people near the Pope have made this argument.
Many times. Look, technically, again, there are some things that the Argentinian bishops built in there that are qualifications. However, as we know from the case of contraception in the Episcopal Church and similar attempts to be modern on these issues, whatever qualifications, limitations people try to put on these things in this particular culture will inevitably start a process, and that's a word that the Pope likes to use. It'll start a process. Where do we stop? You know, do we stop because I have children now? Do we stop because my parents brought me up badly and I was psychologically damaged? I mean, there are annulment cases that proceed along those lines. But there's an infinite number of exceptions to what used to be thought of, and not only by theologians and bishops and whatnot, but by the average guy in the street. Up until, say, 1960, if you picked any Catholic out of a church on a Sunday morning and said, can you receive communion after being divorced and remarried, they would say, well, of course not. I mean, it's just it's assumed that simply can't happen.
Yeah.
So we're in a situation where, you try to be merciful, but you're merciful in a way that opens a door that you may not be able to close after people pass through it.
Cardinal Gerhard Müller, who was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, said that no discipline and no doctrine of the Church had been changed with Amoris Laetitia. This letter and the elevation of it would seem to disprove or argue against his point.
I would agree with Cardinal Muller in the sense it's impossible to overthrow Catholic doctrine by publishing something.
So then what is this?
What is it? I think it's part of the papal attempt to gain acceptance for his point of view, which is that the previous discipline was too harsh, and we have to go to what's called a case-by-case analysis. For me, revelation, which is precisely what the words of Jesus are, if a man divorces his wife and marries another, he commits adultery. That covers all cases. There is no case-by-case exception to that. Now, how do we deal with people who find themselves in this situation? We preach, we say, do not commit sin. If there are children, the Church can contemplate giving the advice that those people can live as brother and sister.
But there's a tribunal set up in every diocese to handle these cases, to review. There's a legislative process, a court process.
Well, that's for marriages that are viewed, thought to be invalid.
Right.
This is dealing with the person who says, my marriage is perfectly valid. I just got out of it. Now I'm in a second relationship.
Right.
We can't do this.
No.
You know, you can't, this doctrine, discipline, the whole, everything goes together, which is why this is so troubling. And I think the dubia cardinal are right. Either we get moral precision in the teaching of the Church, or we're going to fall into chaos.
I want to put something up on the screen for you, Robert Royal. Dr. Ed Peters, who is a professor of canon law, raised a very interesting point in an article. He's a professor of canon law at Sacred Heart Major Seminary in Detroit. He wrote this: unless Canon 915 itself is directly revoked, gutted, or neutered, it binds ministers of Holy Communion to withhold that most august sacrament from, among others, divorced and remarried Catholics, except where such couples live as brother and sister and without scandal to the community. If you change practice, you change doctrine, it seems to me. By this shift, represented in that letter from the Argentine bishops, have they gutted Canon 915, or is there a contradiction that we're looking at?
Well, I should probably leave the answer to that part to the canon lawyer, but I'll say this, that this entire development seems to me to inevitably call into question things like that. Why not then? If we're going to make the change, there's a reason why we have an orderly process in the Church, because it's like the secular legal system. Somebody accuses somebody of something else, evidence gets presented, and then a judge and a jury or somebody tries to adjudicate what is the truth, what is justice to be done in these circumstances. If you're going to just issue a letter about somebody else's document and say that nothing else in Catholicism matters, I mean, these are things that touch upon the nature of the Eucharist, about our unity with Christ, about marriage,
two sacraments,
about what the Church is. Do we just make these discrete changes and then we don't care if there are canon law that contradicts things that are being affirmed in some lower level document? I think that this way of proceeding itself, people occasionally accuse me of trying to create confusion or underline confusion. The confusion is there. It hasn't been created by us. It's been noticed that there are all sorts of other Catholic things in play when a document like this is published.
I know, it's easier to kill the messenger, but, you know, we didn't create the message. Father Gerald Murray, I keep getting questions about this. I've heard them all week since this document was published. Is a priest or a bishop obligated to follow Canon 915, which forbids giving the Eucharist to those who are not worthy to receive it, or do they make these exceptions today, given that this is now part of the authentic magisterium, as put forward by Pope Francis and Cardinal Palmiero?
Right. Well, the permission by the Pope in Amoris Laetitia in the famous footnote that the accompaniment can include the sacraments is only a permission, it's not a command. Canon 915 remains. Those who are publicly engaged in grave moral offenses can be denied or should be denied the sacraments because we want to preserve the Church from scandal. The problem, as Bob points out very, very well, is that the legal order in the Church has to be a unified presentation in order to be intelligible. So we have the Archbishop of Lisbon just came out with a statement saying that now divorced and remarried Catholics in his diocese are going to be given the sacraments. The bishops of Malta said the same thing, and they basically left it up to the people to decide for themselves. Right. Canon 915 is still in vigor. It still has the force of law, and it guides my practice. Now, as a priest, I'll tell you this. My goal is to help people get to heaven. The biggest obstacle to that, sin. Ignorance comes in second. Maybe they're together. How do you get rid of sin and ignorance? You tell people the truth, and you help them to live it. you don't create this false notion where someone who knows adultery is wrong can have diminished culpability because they don't like the fact that it's wrong. And I think that's what this dynamic, which applies to so many other things. Why can't you tell a couple that says, well, we don't really understand the Church's teaching on contraception, therefore it's a good thing for us to continue to use it. You tell them, don't do that because it offends God. Now, this language is very absent from many discussions now. The reason why I'm a priest, the reason why the Church exists, to give honor and glory to God, not to make arrangements so that people can excuse bad behavior. And I think this is where we're at.
So what we really do have, we really have to be honest and say, this has created a crisis in the heart of the Church over two major sacraments, and it is unresolved. And it seems to me the effort to clarify by inserting this in the Vatican official acts only muddies the water and causes more confusion, it would seem to me.
Yeah, and let's say this, because there's been a lot of discussion about mercy, about accompanying people and whatnot. I'm going to make a bold statement in the presence of a canon lawyer. Canon 915 is defending the words of Jesus. These are the words of Jesus about the indissolubility of marriage over against the Pharisees, who everyone thinks were hard-hearted legalists, who had allowed divorce. And this is something that went directly against the Judaism of his day, and it stands out, Scripture scholars will tell you, it stands out like a sore thumb because it is not part of his contemporary culture. He's making a statement that they would have found surprising. And it isn't a statement of loosening, it's a statement of, from the very beginning, in Genesis, this is the way God wanted things to be.
Before I run out of time, there's a new book called, provocatively, The Dictator Pope, that is gaining a lot of attention. I know you reviewed it, you both have read it. What do we need to know about this? There are some bold insinuations made in the book. What's your overall take?
I think I've said that it's about, I think it's 90% accurate. And actually, we've talked about many of the things that are in the book, and we've all been involved over in events in Rome where some of
we've seen some of this happen.
Have happened. I think it's a little bit unfortunate that he used such an inflammatory title as a dictator pope because, look, the Pope is the Pope. We have to be loyal to him. We have to try to help him to be, to carry out his charism as the successor of Peter. I believe that most of the stuff that he talks about, the problems with the way that Pope Francis has gone about running the Church are solid. He goes beyond the evidence in a few places. There's an unfortunate rumor that he repeats that somehow the Vatican made contributions to Hillary Clinton's campaign, which sounds like it's a crazy book. But that's only one page, very near, maybe two pages scattered throughout the book. A lot of it is worth reading. It's a short book. It's well documented. It's well documented by many things that are in the public square. Anybody, I think, who is curious to know what exactly this papacy has been doing ought to be aware of the material in that volume.
Father, the Deputy Director General of the Vatican Bank, which got almost no coverage, was walked out of his office last week, taken out of the Vatican walls and put on the street. He is not the first official connected with the Vatican Bank to be walked out or unceremoniously fired. What of the reform of the economic structure of the Vatican, which is the reason Pope Francis was elected and why so many people filled his name in on the ballot, because they wanted a reformer. He was sold as a reform pope. Is that what we're dealing with?
This is a topic that's covered in this book, which with the provocative title, The Dictator Pope, and I would agree with Bob that the accuracy and the depth and bringing together of lots of information is very useful. It helps interpret this latest firing. There have been a lot of attempts, and the Pope, this is one of the things I praised him on when he first came in, said he wanted to clean it up, put Cardinal Pell in charge.
Economic Secretary.
And then boom, everything got chipped away. Reform efforts seemed to get bypassed. We as Americans, I think, are very conscious that having an audit is not a pleasant thing, but it's a good thing to establish institutional credibility.
And transparency.
Yeah, the Vatican auditor was fired recently, you know, so...
and that was after Price Waterhouse was shown the door, after J.P. Morgan was supposed to get, in transparency that Benedict set up, they were supposed to get annual reports. The Vatican never made the reports to J.P. Morgan. I mean, there is no transparency. Well, and the auditors, there's a string of them, along the Tiber.
Well, this is the thing that I think the Pope really should take up and realize that he's losing a lot of credibility with people who see him as a reformer if the status quo ante, meaning the chaos in the past, is not dealt with more effectively. And people being fired, walked out of buildings without explanations, this is not how you do that.
I want to quickly touch on the Pope's trip to Asia last week. He went to Myanmar. Tell me about that visit. What stood out to you? It was a rather remarkable visit in what he said.
Yeah, I mean, we've said a lot of critical things. I think that what he did there is something remarkable, because it could have been an utter disaster. Even
diplomatic landmine.
Secular commentaries were that he shouldn't do this. He's stepping into the middle of a conflict between Buddhists and the Rohingya, who are Muslims who have been driven into Bangladesh by the Buddhist majority in Myanmar. But he handled it very, very well. Now, there are some people who say he should have spoken out boldly.
While it was in Myanmar.
This is the same kind of thing that people said about Pius XII, that he should have spoken out against the Nazis. But we know that sometimes a moral leader speaking out like that creates further problems for Catholics, for Muslims, etc. So I think he handled that well. He says that he spoke with the military leaders in Myanmar very candidly about what their moral responsibilities were. And I think his presence in Bangladesh was rather charming, the way he spoke with people. So, you know, let's give him a lot of credit. This was a good thing.
Good visit.
Yeah, agreed. And we should also remember he's there to strengthen the faith of the Burmese Myanmar Catholics. It's a small but very vibrant church, and in Bangladesh similarly. The Pope going to these non-Catholic countries to strengthen the Catholic population, I think, is a wonderful thing.
Well, Papal Posse, Merry Christmas. We'll see you in the new year, if not sooner. Thank you both for being here. You can follow Robert Royal and Father Gerald Murray's commentary at CatholicThing.org, and also read Robert's review of that book, which is very interesting reading. President Trump declares Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel. Is this the end of hopes for a peace process in the region, or an opening? Dr. WALID PHARES, when we come back, and the chart-topping Dominican Sisters of Mary are here to share a Christmas tune and the secret of their success. Stay right there.
I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
That was President Donald Trump announcing his decision to give official diplomatic recognition to Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Though certainly not a new idea, the move was immediately controversial. How will it affect the peace process in the region? Here with analysis, I'm joined by Middle East expert and former foreign policy advisor to President Trump, Dr. WALID PHARES. Thank you for being here, WALID.
Thank you.
Now, this has been on the books, and we should say this up front. Since 1995,
That's right.
the United States has had on the book the intention to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Why is this so contested now that Trump is doing it? 3 presidents have promised to do it, or 4.
It has been a consensus, as you just said, since 1995 in Congress. Both parties, even the independent, all candidates and most presidents have pushed for that. What's happening now is that there is a process. There is a series of coalitions forming in the Middle East. There is Iran. The administration, President Trump, thought that he will start changing the process on the ground. But my concern is we have to go and do other chapters. This is the first chapter. We're moving the embassy. We put it in Jerusalem. Okay. But now what's the fate of Jerusalem? What's the fate of the Palestinian capital? How the Christians going to have access? What's the relationship with the Vatican and everything else? That has to be done now also.
Well, the Pope this week came out and said, wait a minute, I have great problems with this. We have always shared the ideal of a 2-state solution where it would be a shared capital, Jerusalem, because it's so important to the 3 major religions. And they are worried about the egress, getting to the holy sites, all of that. I want to play something for you. This is New York Times columnist Tom Friedman, and he's talking about, or reacting rather, to Trump's decision. Listen to this. I want your reaction.
We had a chance here to actually trade something, to come to Netanyahu and say, look, you want recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital from the United States, and here's the deal, Bibi. I will give you that recognition, but in return, I want you to announce that you will freeze all settlement building in the West Bank. We would have actually used this question of Jerusalem in service of the peace process. Instead of doing that, Trump just gave it away for free.
How is this going to facilitate peace? By giving away the thing that Israel has so sought after. They got what they want already. Why come to the peace table now?
That's right. Well, we could do other stuff. For example, we could now approach the Palestinians and tell them, look, we're going to build an extension to Jerusalem. I mean, Jerusalem 2,000 years ago was not that large. And 1,000 years ago during the Crusade, it wasn't also that large. So what we can do with the Palestinians, and it has been discussed, including with the Arabs, is that there is an area, called a suburb of Jerusalem called Abu Dis. So we will build a new capital. Look, the Egyptians out of Cairo are moving and creating an administrative capital 100 kilometers away. The Brazilians out of Sao Paulo moved to Brasilia. So the idea of actually moving and adjusting the capital is possible. But what we need to do is give access to all religions, to everybody, to the holy sites. That is something that has to be done, and quickly, so that the deal is really full.
So why did the president do this now? He claims he wants to shake things up, but he still supports a two-state solution.
Yes.
But by saying we affirm that Israel's capital is here in Jerusalem, you really are already taken one of the major contested points off the table. Does this facilitate peace?
Look, there is a perception that if the president and his administration would have announced everything as a package in one shot, like this is for Israel, this is for the Palestinians, bring in the Arab coalition, and then go to the Security Council and issue it with the support of Europe and the Vatican, that could have been probably an option.
Why didn't he do that?
I think he has been advised that some components are not going to move at this point in time. So what he tried to do is to push one component and compel everybody else to come, compel the Palestinians to choose, yes, let's have a capital. You know, talk with the Vatican after telling the Vatican, look, it's going to work. And the holy sites will be with you to be decided on. Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, well, this is going to be a thorny path forward. And look, Europe is reacting in not positive ways. Theresa May in Britain has condemned this. Angela Merkel has condemned it. You have the Saudi Arabians, who the president seemed to be uniting the Arab world. Jordan, they're all opposed to this. What are they missing?
That's why, Raymond, I think that if this is the only decision made, it's going to be difficult. But if that decision is the beginning of a process that would include talking with the Saudis, because we also read reports that the Saudis in general will say no, in reality will gather the Arabs, that the Vatican eventually will negotiate the holy sites, that the Europeans are waiting because they have interest elsewhere. All of that is true. Time will let us know if this is a partial move or this is the beginning of a comprehensive move. I don't know.
Jared Kushner has been working on a peace plan for a while now, the president's son-in-law. He made a speech this past week where he gave very few details up. I was thinking as I watched this announcement come forward that this might be a provocative act to shake everybody from their comfort zones and to change the conversation. But what would that conversation look like now with this big contested point off the table?
If this is a shock, as you're describing it, so that something will happen, if you have not prepared for that something, if you have not already spoken with your partners for that something, maybe nothing else will happen. So I am hopeful that this first part will be the beginning of a process already planned, already addressed. And my concern now is that time is going to tell us, but we don't have much time.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, the Middle East is a powder keg, let's face it.
Yeah.
A part of me also thinks, using Tom Friedman's logic, that the president will then go to Bibi Netanyahu and say, okay, I'm with you. You got your capital. We're moving on. Now you're going to have to help me out here.
I think this is the logical step. I think most observers in the Middle East and also here who understand the Middle East think that Mr. Netanyahu got everything he wanted. Every prime minister of Israel would have wanted over the past many decades. So now it will be probably more easy for them, easier.
There's more political capital to burn off.
Yes, to give up. But that's why I am posing the question, was there a comprehensive plan and this is the first chip? And then we're going to see more? The next weeks, the next months are going to tell us.
But that's an interesting, and it's the first time I've heard it, interesting idea of building out East Jerusalem and creating a permanent capital for the other state, the Palestinian state there. But how feasible is that, given the realities on the ground in Jerusalem?
Remember, our president is an expert in real estate, strategic real estate. So building new cities, and not just him. I mean, look, the Saudis and the UAE and others in the Egyptians are talking about rebuilding Palestine. So Let us monitor if the Arabs are going to be talking with the Palestinians and tell them, look, together with the Americans, we could get to that position where you're going to have a new capital plus a piece of Jerusalem if you're satisfied with that.
So you envision Trump Israel, Trump Palestine, two hotels facing each other.
I don't want to go there.
Across the wall, in time. Walid Phares, thank you as always for being here and for your insight. When we return, Christmas is just weeks away. What could be better than the gift of music? Sisters Joseph, Andrew, and Louis Marie of the Dominican Sisters of Mary will give us a special preview of their brand new Christmas CD that's at the top of the Billboard charts. Stay right there.
Not doing it for personal glory or for the glory of the community. It's not about us. It's about Him.
That was Mother Assumpta Long on the musical mission of the Dominican Sisters of Mary, she being one of the founders of the order. The voices of these religious sisters have once again conquered the classical music charts. They have been #1 for 4 weeks on the Billboard charts, and they're still going with their new CD, JESU, Joy of Man's Desiring, Christmas with the Dominican Sisters of Mary, from Sony and de Montfort Music. Joining me in studio is my old friend, Sister Joseph Andrew, another foundress of the order, and Sister Louis Marie, an accomplished musician and one of the voices on the CD. Sisters, thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Okay, I have to start. Sister, since you're the new addition to the panel, Sister Louis Marie, I'm starting with you. To what do you attribute the ability of this group of nuns? I know this isn't your full-time job. You actually teach children and educate and do really other talented things. Why are you busting through the charts here? You're outselling the Piano Guys and Yo-Yo Ma and Yo-Yo Ma's Mama and everybody else in the Mama clan. What is it? Why are people drawn to this album?
Well, it's just the hunger for God. It's a part of being human, and we pray this way all of the time, and the Holy Spirit really speaks through our music to that hunger in the human soul. So I think that's really what it is, Raymond. I mean, He's the only explanation for the success of our efforts to bring Him to people.
I mean, you're even in the top of the holiday, Christmas albums. I mean, the classical charts are hard enough, but now you're at the top of the holiday albums during this time of year. It's pretty good. I mean, you're outselling Elvis and Mariah Carey.
It's fun.
But it can't be just the music. It's something more than that. I mean, they're probably hearing the love and the attention and the fraternity of this community, right?
I think that's beautiful. It really is who we are, and it's the way that we pray. So it was very easy to put together in 2 days because it's just
Wait. You put it together in 2 days?
We did, yes, we did.
Mariah Carey's going to love us. Well, how did this, how 2 days? You mean you have 16 songs here?
Because we're busy. We have a lot to do. So if we can get this group of sisters together from all over where they're teaching, we've got very limited time.
How many nuns recorded on the album?
There's 9 on the album.
Oh, there's only 9 albums, 9 sisters on the album.
And if you count myself on the organ and the guitar. 10.
Well, we count you, so 10.
Okay, there's
now,
10.
So don't lie. The sister told a big lie. You heard it. We're going to pull that and send it right to Pope Francis. But you have 16 selections on this album.
Yes.
First of all, I don't fathom how you can bring in nuns from different parts of the country and get them to sing a repertoire of 16 songs in 2 days. How is that possible? Or is this part of your communal routine?
It is part of the community, and our sisters are very gifted with music, and since the Divine Office, we use so much music, and even around doing the dishes, if there are 5 sisters, they'll break into 5-part harmony on something. We just enjoy music a great deal. It's so uplifting, and really it's just kind of who we are and how we express ourselves in many ways.
Well, I saw on social media you all were busting into song with the Salvation Army people.
Yes.
You're at Rockefeller
Did you
Center.
say that?
You're skating. I mean,
That's right.
so you got a song in your heart and on your lips too.
True. That's
Sister Louis Marie, tell me about this little selection we're going to play. This is a Polish song, one people might not be too familiar with. Tell me about this song and how it made it onto the album. Why this? Good. Tell me about it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that is a very special song to our community, and it was a Polish piece, that Lujai, that we sing together every Christmas, and it's a very important part of our community life together. And then we mixed it with Silent Night, so it's a particularly close to our heart Christmas carol that we sing together every year.
And it's a Polish song, you
Yes,
say.
exactly.
Now,
yes.
Who might the Pole in the group be?
Wonder.
Who might that be? Sister Joseph Andrew, just
That's
slipping
right.
in.
That's right.
Exactly.
The little tip of the hat to the Poles. Let's roll this. This is beautiful. This is sisters singing a beautiful Polish lullaby. Sleep, little Jesus. Watch. When I hear that, there's an awful lot of musical talent in this cloister. I mean, I've listened to this CD innumerable times in the car. Is this going to be the last album, or are you doing more?
Only God knows.
Oh, don't give me that answer. Do you all want to record again or not?
If the opportunity presents itself and we're able, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we're not saying no to anything, because God is a God of surprises, and He keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, and this is the 20th anniversary of the order, so
It
it's a really nice
certainly
way to kind of
is.
punctuate the 20th anniversary as well.
Yes.
Exactly.
What's been the reaction? What are you hearing from people as they listen to this, as they go about shopping and getting ready for the big holidays?
Really, it's kind of thank you for letting us come into your community and listen in on your music and join your family during this very special family celebration of Christmas.
Do you find there's a sadness in some people during this time of year, that they're looking for something that really uplifts them and perhaps connects them to God?
I think that's probably why the response is as it is, because that's how we pray, you know. We pray by singing these songs. When we sing these songs, we're always before the Lord. And so that connection is, again, what people are hungering for. And they receive that. They receive an avenue, a sort of a direct line to the Lord through our music.
And we should tell people, this is a mix, and it's a nice mix of traditional hymns that you will know, and carols, and then a few new selections around the edges.
That's right.
But, and this is all part of your normal...
Yes, we will be
This is what you
singing
sing
all
during the
this.
holidays.
From midnight mass on, we will be singing these.
Oh, how often do you rehearse?
Once a week. We have
So
choir
you
once
rehearse a
week.
lot. I mean,
Well,
that's-
yeah, we have choir practice once a week.
and you're
so-
singing together every day.
Yes.
Oh, definitely, yes.
I mean, you're in the divine office. I mean, it's a part of your
Yes.
daily lived
It truly
experience.
is, yes.
I've read in some of the reviews, and I think they're right, that the harmonies that you have, some of them very complex, are really only possible when you are accustomed to singing in that proximity to people regularly, every day. And there is a blend there that I do think is kind of unrepeatable. You can't,
That's beautifully
you know,
said,
but, I mean,
Raymond.
well, look, I see a lot of Broadway, I see opera all the time.
You're
it is
right,
rare to
though.
have that kind of
It is who
blend.
we are, and we know each other, and you know, we can break into harmonies, and yes, and we like to
because you're listening.
challenge
Yeah, you're
each
listening
other.
to each other, and you're.
Yes.
It's a little competition,
Playing
but it's
off
also
each
a
other.
family. It's
Yes,
a family.
yes, yes.
And that's what I think really cuts through here and makes this so
that's
special.
beautiful.
And I think
Thank
people will
you.
hear more of that. Well, I hope this is not your last CD. And that there's a new one. And if you have room for a lyric baritone, I'm available.
Okay, you're invited.
Thank you for being here.
Okay,
Thank you both.
you.
The album is so beautiful. Make sure you get it. JESU, the Joy of Man's Desiring. Christmas with the Dominican Sisters of Mary is available now at music stores everywhere, online, Amazon, iTunes, and at the Dominican Sisters of Mary website, sistersofmary.org. Before I let you go, where did the name come from? It is a peculiar name for a best-selling Christmas album.
You mean JESU?
JESU, Joy of Man's
Because
Desire.
as Dominicans, our spirituality is so incarnational, and so the fact that the Word became flesh is it just means a great deal to us. So He is the desire of all humans' hearts.
Beautiful. Thank you, sisters. Thank you both for being here. God bless you. That is all the time we have for now, but with Christmas so near, now I get to do a product placement. I'm getting all kinds of letters and emails from you about the Will Wilder series. Books 1 and 2, or 1 and 2, are available in hardback this Christmas. If your family or young adventurers, anyone really from 8 and up, have not read the series, I would love if you did, and you will love what you find here. A new Amazon review appeared this week that captures what I mean. Lowell Johnson writes, I've started reading Will Wilder, The Relic of Perilous Falls, to my son at bedtime this week, and we love it. The only bad thing is he fights going to sleep because he wants to keep reading. I love the memories this book is creating for special times with my son. When I read that, I almost cried, because that's why I wrote the book. I wanted families to come together, and the joy and the gift of reading to a child and experiencing a world with a child is irreplaceable. So I hope whether you get my books or another, you do that this season when you have a little extra time. Will Wilder, Book 2 will be in paperback this spring, and Book 3 is coming soon, so get ready. You can buy Book 1 and 2 and be ready. Stay tuned until next week. The show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook. Follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com, and be sure to join us next week. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.